Surrendering himself to Darth Vader and the Empire on the Forest Moon of Endor, Luke Skywalker would make one final attempt to bring his father back to the light side of the Force before he was brought to the Emperor. In one of my favorite scenes from the original trilogy, Luke would foreshadow what would eventually occur within the Emperor's throne room and reveal the truth about Vader on Endor. There was still good within the Sith Lord, and not only that, but Luke could feel the conflict within his father. The little bit of good that still remained that represented the best qualities of Anakin Skywalker, fighting to overcome the brutality of Vader. Since we know that Vader would reject Luke's plea on Endor to join him and the light side, but this would eventually occur only a short time later during the Battle of Endor, I've always wondered, just how close was Vader to joining Luke on Endor and making the choice to once again become Anakin Skywalker? What were Vader's thoughts during and immediately after his discussion with Luke, and did the Dark Lord of the Sith also recognize the light within himself, or his own struggle with having to deliver his son to the Emperor as Luke revealed? We'll look at these questions from within the Legends lore and find that while I certainly wouldn't suggest Vader was already redeemed on Endor, he was a lot closer to joining Luke on the Forest Moon than might immediately be apparent when watching the film. The real interesting aspect here is Vader's struggle with the dark side, and more accurately, his inability to find what was needed to once again step into the light as Anakin. This is where the separation comes from Vader on Endor and his ultimate redemption not long after on the second Death Star. But since this is the final scene we have of Vader before the events that took place in the Emperor's throne room, I find Vader's thoughts during his conversation with Luke and the struggle he found himself in on Endor to be fascinating. Just as Luke recognized on Endor, Vader was consumed by conflict. Both prior to Luke turning himself over to the Empire and during his conversation he had with his son, Vader would have liked nothing more than to free himself from his master Darth Sidious and join Luke. While Luke would plead with Vader to flee Endor, the Empire, and the Emperor, the truth of the matter was that Vader already had visions of doing exactly that in the year that had passed since their duel on Cloud City. In fact, the thought had already occurred to Vader to try to take Luke off of Endor to persuade his son to ally with him. When Sidious told his apprentice to go to the Moon of Endor and wait for Luke to surrender himself to Vader, preying upon Luke's compassion, Vader thought this would be the perfect time to launch his plan. As he left the Emperor's throne room, Vader went so far as to imagine a future where Luke was his apprentice, where together they would become the most powerful Sith who ever lived, invincible as they rejected any rivalry or secrets between them. However, while this desire would continue to stay with Vader as he spoke to Luke, another truth would ultimately overpower the thoughts of the Dark Lord, which would prevent Vader from joining Luke on Endor. Vader knew that in reality, there was nowhere he and Luke could go or hide without Sidious and the Empire finding and destroying them. Just as often as Vader would envision himself and Luke ruling the galaxy together, his visions would also include the unavoidable doom and wrath that would be unleashed upon them by Sidious, making Vader powerless to disobey. Therefore, there was a tremendous amount of struggle within Vader on Endor, just as Luke recognized. Vader wanted to escape from Endor and join Luke, but while we might consider Vader being close to joining Luke at this point, that consideration was all but erased as he knew it was impossible while his master Sidious was still alive. But there's another important point here for why Vader, despite his wanting to escape Sidious and the Empire to join Luke, wasn't really close to the redemption he would ultimately find later during the Battle of Endor. While Vader would struggle with his feelings and the pull of the light as Luke revealed, going so far as to admit to himself that he wished he could let go of his hate, the Vader that existed on Endor during Episode 6 wasn't yet ready to turn away from the dark side. Although he wanted to rid himself of Sidious's influence and join Luke, Vader was certain it was too late to turn back from his path with the dark side while he was on Endor. Vader's goals on Endor were still what they were from the moment he recognized his son was alive. He wanted to bring Luke to the dark side so they could rule the galaxy as father and son. As the Episode 6 novelization reveals, Vader had no desire to hurt Luke unless his own life depended on it. But there's no doubt that Vader's goal after their meeting on Endor was to bring Luke to the dark side, as Vader was still not yet close to his redemption back into the light. In bringing Luke before the Emperor, Vader was initiating his long-term plan for Luke, where he and Sidious would cause the Jedi to reject the light and join the dark side. With Luke then firmly allied with the Sith, Vader would train him in the ways of the Force together with Sidious, before ultimately allying with his son to overthrow the Emperor. Vader's redemption and path back into the light as Anakin wasn't a possibility until Vader rejected all of these plans for Luke, which were really a function of his own selfishness and lust for power. When Vader no longer cared about his own power or even his own future with Luke as his apprentice, desiring only to save his son no matter the cost to himself, that's when he was redeemed back into the light. And based on novels like the Episode 6 novelization and the rise and fall of Darth Vader, this of course didn't occur or even really begin on Endor, but within the Emperor's throne room when Luke needed to be rescued from the onslaught of Darth Sidious. Therefore, looking at the Vader that existed on Endor and attempting to see just how close he was to the Vader who would ultimately be redeemed, I believe the Legends lore establishes a few interesting points. While Vader wanted nothing more than to join Luke on Endor and escape from Sidious and the Empire, Vader rejected this option as impossible, knowing he and Luke would always be found by Sidious and destroyed. But the more important point is this: the Vader that existed on Endor wasn't one who was close to embracing the light, but just the opposite. There was conflict within Vader as Luke felt, but he was still firmly a proponent of the power of the dark side. And it's this attachment to the dark side still felt by Vader on Endor that would cause him to obey his master Sidious and bring Luke before the Dark Lord. In this way then, although it would occur only a relatively short time later, Vader was still a significant distance from his eventual redemption back into the light, which wasn't found yet on Endor, but in his desire to forget about how Luke could help him rule the galaxy and instead selflessly defend his son from Sidious. So there we have it, Vader's thoughts during and after his discussion with Luke on Endor in Episode 6. Thank you very much to all of the Patreon members of Star Wars Reading Club, as your support is so greatly appreciated. You can find all of our social media links and a link to our Star Wars gaming channel in the description below for updates and even more Star Wars content. We love making these videos, so why not subscribe for more fun Star Wars theories and discussions. Also, if you enjoyed the video, think about giving a like or leaving a comment. If not for me... for disastrous overconfidence.